Burgess & Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, Jeremy.
How are you?
I'm good. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday indeed, and it's almost Easter. So this is our final show before we have a bit of an Easter break. So welcome everybody to this week's edition of Burgess & Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, technology change, innovation. This week we're going to kind of end of term wrap up what we've been talking about for the last few weeks. We've got some quite funny stuff and parallels with Lineker and your dad, which is a bit odd, but anyway, it's quite good. And of course, we start with the news. So you saw this one about cyber. We've touched on it a few times, haven't we? About Lloyd's kind of backing down or backing out of the cyber space by putting clauses in around what's covered and what isn't, and this one about the state-backed, whether things are state-backed or not.
So it's been a big issue for some time over cyber, and I think almost from its inception, cyber has been seen as potentially a systemic, not an insurance problem, and therefore, you should have insurance products attached to it. This is contentious because obviously it's a big opportunity for the market, for the insurance market, or the market pulls out altogether and you leave it to state-backed organisations and funds of various kinds to cover these attacks in some way, shape, or form, or self-insurance, I guess. So it's been an issue. The issue really is revolved around the definition of war. So as we know, most insurance policies have war exclusions, but the definition of war in cyber, of course, is about an attack. Is it state-backed or not? And that problem is the one now that Lloyd's is kind of taking head on and saying that its franchisees, I suppose, in the Lloyd's market are going to have to reword or change the wordings in their policies on cyber to include exemptions, and payouts therefore wouldn't be made if it was deemed to be a state-backed cyber attack. So that's the fundamental. But opponents are saying that could, at one end, at the other end of the scale, are saying this could put people off buying cyber at all. And there's a McTavish survey that's been done where they're saying a lot of people are not buying insurance in cyber because either it's too expensive or they fear that the payouts will not happen. So I think this would add to that, in my view. I definitely think it would put people off. And in fact, Adrian Cox at Beazley, big sellers of cyber, big into the cyber space, are saying they're seeing a top line decline already on cyber. So cyber is getting a bit of a pummeling. And the other issue I think that is going on around this is that is almost the PR itself and the timelines that Lloyd's have set. So there is quite a lot of criticism. So Sarah Stevens, who's head of cyber at Marsh, is quoted in here saying that there hasn't been enough time for these insurers to come up with solutions, and insurers are sort of handcuffed by these timings, which is only in a week or two's time that they've got to put these new wordings in, and then that's that. Now, it does feel, certainly from the outside, that this is quite problematic in terms of the timings, for sure. And it does feel like it's not traditionally the way the market would work, in that it does come up with all sorts of different solutions, and it could be argued this is stifling creativity and all that. So I think I can see why there are some issues here. The head of Coalition, who are the big sort of cyber MGA, I think, who have all sorts of services, not just insurance policies, but services related to cyber attacks and cyber checks and cyber to mitigate cyber attacks. So they're a pretty big player. And Joshua Motua, who's the CEO, said it's a PR disaster for the insurance industry. So there's a lot of flack flying around in the market around this. The other final thing, really, I suppose, is what does this definition, and the FT article discusses whether the definition and how the definition of state of war, basically, in this context is arrived at. And I think the notion here is this is going to be quite difficult regardless. So I think you are setting up for quite a lot of litigation around existing cyber policies or new cyber policies where there is an exemption, but it is not proven that it's state-backed because it's hard to prove it. I don't know necessarily what I think about it, but it does seem very messy for a market that's a lot of opportunity. And we've been talking about it for a while. Feels almost like a bit of a panicky reaction from Lloyd's as well. They'll probably say it's not panicky, but it does feel a little bit sort of previous in terms of the way they've pushed it through. To be fair, Adrian Cox, who I'd say is probably one of the leading businesses and leading players in the market, is saying it's the right step, defending it, saying it is a step in the right direction on transparency. So maybe it's just a shot across the bows, and it's saying we can't all just keep on wandering into this and expecting it not to be right. So Lloyd's has decided to take a stand on it. So who knows? It could go either way. So cyber could be a great market, and other markets could come up with solutions, and Lloyd's will be seen as a loser in that.
Yeah.
And its reputation, I think, will be damaged because it will be seen as not being creative or innovative. Alternatively, other markets could write a lot of this stuff, come a cropper, and Lloyd's will be seen as being very prescient and will be praised. But who knows? All a bit of a bet.
Yeah, it is, and the jury's out. The discussion's being had, isn't it? I think you were saying before that Stephen Catlin has come out and say this isn't an area because it is systemic risk. It's not something that insurance should really cover because the data's not there, and those large risks that you can't really quantify or track or have data on. It's just they're not the type of products that we're into writing.
Yeah, I think Stephen Catlin's point originally was more about the fundamental of, is this an insurance policy if it's a systemic risk? I think that has morphed into this argument about, well, it isn't necessarily systemic if it's just one of those things where a rogue agent is doing it. But when it's backed by China or Russia or some other state, then you are saying that is not going to be in any way an unexpected thing. It is actually deliberate actions on the part of governments. So you're in. I mean, on that basis, Lloyd's is probably exactly right to say if they've got the evidence to say that most of these are state-backed now, and it's just another form of warfare, then it's inevitably going to be a payout if you don't exclude war from it. But then is there even a market then if you're talking about non-state-backed cyber attacks, if you could even identify those as such? I don't know. I mean, it's really the difficult thing is how do you identify whether this was a state-backed one? I mean, if you or our businesses got hacked, I mean, we would do whatever we needed to do to fix it, and that would be it. And then what if someone said, well, actually we think that was state-backed, so therefore we're not paying out on any of that? Then that policy is pretty useless. But would we ever really know? I mean, if an insurer decided they didn't want to pay out, they'd just say, well, we're pretty sure it's state-backed, you're not getting payout.
Yeah.
And we're not likely to go to law, are we? Because that would be too expensive.
Yeah, and too much time.
Well, exactly. So it feels like we're at a moment when this could kill off the cyber market to some extent. Yeah.
We shall keep an eye on that because it's a big developing area, and I think you're right. Could be an opportunity lost if it's not kind of.
I mean, it's like buying a car and saying, "Yeah, it'll drive for now," but actually, at some point, it might not.
Yeah,
it might not work in the morning. I think that kills off that.
Yeah, the confidence in the market.
Yeah, it does. Got it.
Good. All right, thanks for that one, Ben. Let's talk about Gary Lineker and your dad and Nazis, because we were talking last week when. Well, firstly, Gary Lineker's had a good couple of weeks, I would say. He kind of won the battle with the BBC and the government, if there was a winner and a loser, and then he was found in favour, wasn't he, with the HMRC tax thing, saying that he was actually employed by his company and whatever the details are. So it's been a good couple of weeks for him. Weirdly, you found a kind of a similar thing that happened to your dad.
Yes. So I'll give the background. My dad was the head of the schools. There's a senior chief inspector of schools many years ago, and retired in his mid to late 50s, and then did other things. But he, having left that senior role, he then, at one point in 1993, decided that he needed to criticise the government over its education policy and various aspects of it. And he basically said, this was the article at the time, former education chief criticises cavalier policy. So he was saying that if basically this policy continues, there will be a problem in the schools. So, but what he did was very similarly to Gary Lineker, he characterised it as Lineker did, linking it to being sort of somewhat analogous, or the potential for this to be something that was, something that a totalitarian type of state would do. So this is his comment. There was a distinctive whiff of racial discrimination and prejudice in the recent debate over the content of art in the music curriculum. He said, the Third Reich and Joseph Stalin's Soviet dictatorship only encouraged art which glorified their regimes. And although the situation in Britain had not yet reached that extreme, it was serious. Dire consequences could follow if present political interference persisted. Now, obviously, I've got an interest in protecting the reputation of my own father here. So it seems to me that was quite a reasonable thing to say. And we'll come back to Lineker in a minute, in the sense that he was just saying, look, to understand what I'm saying is to say that there is some prejudice, if you like, within this. And if you let this go on, it could be worse. So anyway, he was very firmly slapped down, though, as was Lineker later on. So Baroness Blatch, who is no longer around, but she was Minister of State for Education at the time. Professor Bolton is clearly out of touch with what is going on in education and would appear to be firing a parting shot as a man who has lost his grip on educational reality and is now consumed by bitter recrimination. Parallels with Nazi Germany and the Communist Russia were offensive and patently absurd. So she didn't mince her words, and I can only say that without any bias and objectively, my father has never been consumed by bitter recrimination. He had a successful career, and then a subsequently second successful career in kind of quasi-retirement or working part-time, and never has he had a feeling of bitter resentment. But it's kind of interesting how politicians will push and slap down the people when they're making a point about this, and they hate that kind of illusion that they are somehow extreme in their views. It's almost like saying an insurer that doesn't pay claims, it's the worst thing you can say about me.
Yeah. And then we bring it up to the modern day kind of Lineker experience of a couple of weeks ago, and you pulled out this from the Twitter sphere.
So there's a couple of funny things. There's one funny thing I'll come back to, but Suella Braverman basically said almost the same thing as Baroness Blatch, which is to kind of throw out those kind of flippant analogies diminishes the unspeakable tragedy that millions of people went through. And I don't think anything happening in the UK today can come close to what happened in the Holocaust. Well, actually, Gary Lineker was saying nothing like that in terms of what he was doing. He was similarly doing something that my father was doing, to say that if you carry down a route like this, you could start to get into that, because logically that's where you end up. And of course, the politicians will turn that round and say, actually, you're because they don't want to answer the direct question about their policy. What they do want to do is diminish the person who said it because of the analogies. Now, right, whether you use those rightly or wrongly, and whether Lineker should have done that as an employee or freelancer of the BBC, that's for them to decide. But they do pile in, so it's quite interesting. There are lots of things that obviously they piled in on Lineker, failed as well miserably to get him sacked, which they would dearly have loved to have happened, because now he's become the kind of talisman of the left in some ways, or the Liberals. And Penny Mordaunt, they borrowed from Lineker's playbook. Like Lineker's got a playbook. I don't know whether that's true, but anyway. And then Gary Lineker here says, thanks for mentioning me in your clumsy analogy. I'm just happy to have been better in the 6-yard box than you are at the dispatch box. Best wishes, Gary. So I just think the politicians overall have come out with exactly what you'd expect to do. They're easy to bait. They respond in the way you'd expect. And you kind of win the argument in a way. So the politicians should probably just shut up and not get involved. But that's not their way. And
yeah, it's so interesting that happened so many years ago. And then history just repeats itself, doesn't it? But in the age of social media, everything.
I mean, there's probably been lots of them. It just happened to be one that came out relating to my dad. And I think it is quite, the other thing is it's probably quite a common thing to do, to say that actually, you are becoming, if you start on a particular route in a policy, you could be seen to be totalitarian and it could be very dangerous. I mean, that's a reasonable argument to make, whether you agree or disagree with it. It's not unreasonable. And then to just mention that it could be, you could get close to that those sort of policies, but it terrifies politicians because they just hate being tarred with that bribe. But it's a reasonable challenge to any politician that they're becoming extreme.
Yeah. It reminds me, as we were speaking about the Father Ted episode, when one of the fathers says, do you want to see my war collection of memorabilia? And it's all Nazi stuff, and he goes into this room full of stuff, and he goes, and Father Ted just goes, yeah, you do become a bit more right wing as you get older.
Yes. And then the guy, the priest is also standing at the wall, isn't he, saying, so I hear, Father Ted, you've become a racist now.
Yeah. It's good. Very good. Thanks for sharing that, Ben. That is good stuff. Right, let's move on. So I thought we'd talk a bit about AI because this week it was headline news with Elon Musk and a bunch of other people signing an open letter about pausing AI development because of the risk to society. And it's quite interesting because of the release of Chat GPT 4 a couple of weeks ago. And basically just saying that we should perhaps have a moratorium for a while to see how it's developing, what the impacts might be, where the regulation needs to be, and all that kind of thing, which would all sound perfectly reasonable. I think there is some, just on a kind of big picture, that there's a bit of double standards going on here, because I think Elon Musk, for a long time, he was putting the AI in his cars to do the self-driving cars, and he was pushing that through at pace and was battling against regulation, and now he's on the other side of the fence. But it's a reasonable point, I think, to make, that we don't understand how these technologies are developed. We don't really know how they're going to impact society, and perhaps we should reflect before we pile in. I think the problem is the genie's out of the bottle now. I've been using that version 4 recently, well, ever since it came out, and it is quite amazing. I'm going to come on to how it's changed and how it's developed in a moment. But yeah, just wanted to get your thoughts, Ben, on what you thought of the open letter.
So first of all, I mean, clearly the first thought is actually, funny that Microsoft isn't calling for this, but then all the others who use AI, as you say, are basically saying, could you stop while we catch up, as opposed to this is an ethical or moral issue. But there are clearly, a bit like with the cyber argument, there clearly are some concerns, ethical concerns, and I would probably subscribe to the view that ethics is behind the curve as the AI develops here. So I've been asked questions at various conferences over the last few years about the use of any automation, really, but AI in particular around decisions on insurance claims or policies, and that those could be very excluding of certain groups without, and you could get systemic issues happening on that. So I can see, particularly around use of data and stuff, that there's ethical issues, but equally there are all sorts of ethical issues anyway around all this stuff. So why would it be different now? I suppose it's just the pace of ChatGPT in particular, or the perceived pace of that moving on, that causes causes the issue, and it's seen as a game changer. And in a funny way, they've all reacted, panic, a bit like Lloyd's in a way, like panic. Suddenly, well, we have to draw a line in the sand here. Stop, hold up, wait a minute, what's going on?
Yeah.
But this is it's also a situation where I think that they've tried to put out, our competitors have tried to put out other AI, and they've not done as well as ChatGPT. So there's this sort of maybe a bit of a concern competitively, but also on that. But I don't know. I mean, and maybe it's. Do you believe? I mean, this is a kind of general rhetorical question, but do you believe that people who develop these sort of technologies are really the people who know whether they're benign or not? I don't think you do. I mean, Apple developed a phone and Samsung develops a phone. I think they're technologists. I don't think they take a particular view on whether someone will use that phone to create, for example, a terrorist bomb or something like that, albeit it could be. So I don't think the technologists are necessarily the best people to listen to on this, because I think they're in their own world of hype, and believe that technology contributes more than it actually does to society. What I would say is, why not listen to some of the people who are the journalists and the writers whose jobs are supposedly are going as a result of this? And most of those, from what I can hear, are saying, well, there's no way that this will replace the sort of quality writing that we do to sell newspapers or books. And I agree with that. So I think the art of writing is not necessarily under threat. I think you and I, and we'll talk about it in a second, do sort of feel that actually some of this stuff at the kind of grunt work level of our world of insurance could be very useful and very valuable. But so I wouldn't say therefore you should necessarily slow it down. Yeah.
So it's worth, I think, just talking about how the version 4 has changed from version 3, because there are basically 4 kind of areas where it's changed. So firstly, it's been trained on a lot more data points, and I think they're trying to. I see a big opportunity for actually to help with stuff like trolling and finding bad people on the internet or whatever else. I know you could switch that around, but anyway, that's firstly. I think they're trying to train it. I think they're trying to train it with more information and try and get away from the malicious stuff by, I guess, tweaking the algorithm and getting it right. The next thing, which I think is really amazing, is that it's moved from just text to understanding images. So it can now describe the pattern on some curtains, or you can give it an image and it will be able to understand what it is and then describe back to you what it is. Now you can immediately start to think about how that might impact insurance and insurance claims, especially like low level ones where you might want to take some photographs. I know that tech's been around, but this is a different way of dealing with it in a much more kind of customer focused and interactive way, rather than a kind of very linear, you will go down this system and you'll be an exception if you fall out of it. The third one is really about the processing time. So it's basically massive now, 25,000 words more than the version 3. So that means it can deal with bigger quantities of data much quicker. So that also, if you in the world of the London market and those complex case files or underwriting elements and data, you can think they can plow through that fairly quickly. And then just the accuracy has got better, and you can see that if you use it at all. It's quite staggering what it can do, and certainly the way that it can come up with very readable kind of answers to questions or thoughts is quite amazing. So you can see the applications. You can kind of visualize how it might impact, and also then if you take it a step further, you think, well, what's version 10 going to look like in whatever?
Well, and you see, you've gone very quickly from 2,000 words, I believe, to 25,000 words, which is quite a big leap in terms of this particular piece of software. But actually, what the biggest one will probably be once it's accessing the internet, won't it? Because it will, as I understand it, currently it doesn't do that. So therefore, it's you've got to work on whatever data is in the model. But if it suddenly goes to the internet, then you've got a huge leap up in terms of its capability, and then you get more words and so on and so forth. You'll only be restrained or restricted by the bandwidth, which I believe they are at the moment, because you can only do a certain number of messages and so on and so forth. So, but this is early days, of course. So, I think that the other thing, sorry, I was going to say was that actually there was a contentious bit about this, which was whether that Google would penalize, for example, any AI type language that was being used to promote, SEO or web pages or blogs or whatever you're doing. And they've said, no, they won't. They've said that as long as you use this. So one of the things that will get ratcheted up extremely quickly is the way in which communication is done through your traditional kind of channels on the internet, which is to push information using ChatGPT, with these clusters, word clusters and topic clusters and things. But it will be able to take all of the kind of data and evidence to say if you're talking about this particular subject, then these topic clusters will be the ones that will push you up in terms of SEO. And so this will be like, going from swords and bow and arrows in the Middle Ages to nuclear weapons in modern times in terms of communication, because you'll suddenly have this. So I can see why this isn't just ethical. This is like, you could kind of almost be obliterated by those companies that have got this power and this software. So it is huge.
It is. So, and if you think about some of the business models looking forward, so embedded insurance, parametrics, that's still not quite right. But if you take the power of this kind of technology, you can quite easily get over the practical and operational challenges that those models currently have.
I think you are starting. I mean, I was skeptical of this, but I'm starting to believe now that you look at the insurance industry and say that, well, let's say that, I don't know, 60 or 70 or 90% of it is just that very standard policies with standard wordings. If a claim happens and is recorded in such a way, the policy will be triggered and it could be paid out efficiently and effectively. So the whole automation and efficiency argument, I think now is much, much bigger for me in terms of how transformational it could be in insurance. And I think you could have a very different, I mean, not just insurance, but let's focus on that for now, but you could have a very different insurance industry in 5, maybe even 10, maybe even 5 years, if you start all these different technologies converge and there's breakthroughs which are, for example, let's take the E&S market, which has been in the news a bit with the insurer this week doing a big conference. And that was all talk about automation, about how you can shift large, low value policies out of that market to place them all around the world. So it's both an opportunity, but also that is automating an industry and creates a talent shift. Ultimately, to say, well, actually, most people will not be doing administration type stuff. They will actually be doing or tasked to develop new products, innovate, and create solutions like cyber.
Yes. Yeah. I agree with you, and I think, as I've already said, I think it will be an enabling technology, and I don't believe that it will replace people. It will replace certain aspects of people's jobs, and I do. Everybody I talk to in the tech and operations space no longer puts a business case around, cutting the number of full-time employees as kind of the primary objective.
No.
It's about growth,
Yeah.
and it's about customer engagement, and it's about, as you say, communications and enabling better service at the end of the day. So I'm very excited about it. So there's massive, obviously huge regulatory challenges, huge ethical challenges we've already touched on, bias, unconscious bias, conscious bias. It is problematic, but I'm sure the AI will teach itself to get out of those problems somehow.
Well, it's progress. You can't stop progress, as they say. I think you've really got to think about where you're going to apply it and how you're going to apply it. And we're in a highly regulated industry. To be honest, probably if I was coming in now, I'd set up a business that was looking at AI ethics and principles, because that's going to be very, very lucrative industry, I think, for the next few years. But that's what happened with technology when it came in other areas. You had to have all that, had to catch up. It never goes ahead. You never have the ethics ahead of the technology or the the advancements. They come first, and then you catch up.
Yeah,
it's the way of the world with regulation.
Very good. Right, thanks for that, Ben. And
none of that was written by ChatGPT, by the way.
No, none of it. I nearly did, and then I thought, no, don't be daft.
It'd be rubbish.
Yeah, just lies, all of it. All right, just a quick one. So we've got a conference launched last week, Blueprint 2 Deep Dive Day. So we're just going to try and unpick some of the practical challenges around delivering the Blueprint 2. I think what is quite interesting off the back of the chat about AI is just how much of the work that's been doing now in that kind of format is going to be relevant in the AI-enabled world of the not so distant future. I think this stuff is coming on board, so it'll be interesting to see how companies and organizations are thinking about the blueprint and putting stuff together.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, could all become pointless or more relevant. I don't know.
Yeah, very good. Okay, right. Let's wrap things up. What are you doing this weekend, Ben? Oh, for Easter, anything good?
Well, it's Easter next week, isn't it? So next week, let's talk about Easter rather than this weekend, because not going on this weekend, but next weekend, I'm going to Amsterdam. I'm going to the Netherlands for a few days. Yep. So I'm going to be on the canals, in the brown bars, eating whatever Dutch people eat.
Cannabis.
Chips and mayonnaise and cannabis, perhaps. Yes, I don't know what, but then I'm not. They're trying to keep people away, aren't they? So
they are.
What's the news item? I'll let you know whether they consider me to be a Brit drunken lout.
Yeah, that would be good. I did see that, and I heard it on the news. They immediately found a group of Welsh drunk people.
Yes.
It was quite funny that news article. But you can report. You can give us some on the ground whether that is the case, and whether you're allowed in or whether you're allowed back into the country
I
afterwards?
think they won't remember some of the earlier days. I'm hoping that when I was there in Amsterdam, but and maybe they'll maybe I'm just past it now, so they'll let me in anyway.
Yeah, maybe. What am I doing? I think we're having a quiet weekend. I'm going to see my mum and dad and say hello to them. So that will be nice. I'm looking forward to a few days off. So that'll be good.
Yes. And so when are we back?
We are back in a couple of weeks. So after Easter, we are going to have an interview with Jeff Ward. If you don't know who Jeff is, look him up on LinkedIn. He's got some great insights into kind
It's
of
going to be really
technology.
good. That'll be good. Yeah, Jeff.
So looking forward to that, and we'll play that interview. But for now, enjoy the Easter break, and we shall see you on the other side. Thanks very much.
Yep. Happy Easter.
Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.